all on you if we get confused.
Hi, welcome everyone to this Contracts 101 seminar. This one will be on e-publishing, so if you're not here for e-publishing, you're in the wrong place. My name is Terry Stratton. I'm Director of Education and Outreach here at the Guild, and I'm happy to see so many familiar faces and new faces. Thank you. My mother's watching, so she'll be Let me just remind you to please turn off your cell phones. Please, no pictures, no posting on Facebook during the event. We will be taking questions at the end of the evening, so hold your questions until the end. If I do call on you for a question, please stand up and ask it so that our internet and our audio recording audience can hear the question. I'll be sitting outside actually to let the latecomers in to disrupt people as little as possible. So without any further ado, I'm very happy to introduce Ralph Sevish, our Executive Director of Business Affairs.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks everybody for coming. I just wanted to welcome you here and welcome this estimable collection of talent up here, and tell you that e-publishing, like a lot of other issues, is an issue of concern to the Drama Guild Council. We'd like to develop more information about it so that we can help you think more clearly about it and have as much information as possible. And that's the reason for tonight's seminar, so that we can gather the information with you. We've given you some materials toward that end, and we're hoping that this panel can generate some more conversation, some more ideas, and some more thoughts about it. So I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of our Director of Business Affairs, David Cohen. Thanks again for coming.
Just some quick housekeeping. If you're watching online, if you're watching the live stream, we are going to be referring to some sample contracts and some sample handouts that we gave out. They are available at www.dramatists.guild.com/business affairs or on the Dramatist Guild Facebook page. So dramatists.guild.com, business affairs, or the Facebook page for the Dramatist Guild. And I have this is one of the best panels I've been on, and I've met David Nimmer, who's a
Nimmer on copyright.
That's right, Nimmer on copyright. And so I'll just go down the line and introduce everybody. This is Jonathan Loma. He's an agent with WME. This is Ken Dingledine. He's with Samuel French Publishing. Arthur Kopit. Jeff Sweet. And there's Michael Felmuth from Dramatist Play Service. And Tom Chelberg from Cowan Leibowitz Lotman. And you can read their full bios. Super impressive panel. You're all very lucky to be seeing this tonight. And I can tell you from my point of view, I'm excited about this subject in particular. Very lively, very timely subject. Because a lot of what I hear when I'm at the Business Affairs hotline, people are calling me saying, what are the standards? I just wrote a musical. We get 2, 2, and 2, right? Or, what's my royalty? What subrights do I give? They want subrights. What do I give? Well, these aren't questions that have a steady answer independent of your situation. These are all interrelated issues. Just like, how much do you get for a commission? Well, if you don't write the play, you don't get anything, right? You have to write the play and then you get something. And if I write a play, I get a lot less than if Jeff or Arthur write a play. So there's a lot of give and take in these things, and this is a unique opportunity because all of these contractual provisions, whether you're talking about billing, royalties, advances, subsidiary rights, publishing rights, future options, all of these provisions, at one time, they did not exist. They had to be born. And you can learn a lot about something generally by watching something of this type being born. For example, astronomers learn more about stars and celestial bodies by watching stars and solar systems being born. Biologists learn a lot by just watching different kinds of biological creatures being born. So as we're going through the discussion tonight, I want you to keep that in mind, because with electronic publishing, you're watching contractual provisions being born. And this can inform your knowledge on any contractual provision. when you're negotiating anything. No term, no provision exists in a vacuum. All contractual provisions are subject to evolution, and all of them had to be born. So starting with that, I wanted to address Arthur and Jeff and ask, in terms of these new issues being born that are coming into authors' contracts and e-publishing, how did this start becoming an issue for you two?
The issue is the possibility of it, what it could mean. And for me, by far, the most positive, the most extraordinarily positive aspect of being able to publish electronically is that it means that a writer can correct mistakes that are in those acting editions, which are impossible to correct, and can make amendments which are impossible to make now because you just get addenda and nobody can write them all in and they're not done. So you have an acting edition which is not your play. The ability to see your play performed or musical performed and be able to realize, oh, wait a minute, I can cut this scene if you want, and be able to inform your publishing house that I would like to add an addendum which says, if this happens, this circumstance, the director can cut this or move this, or if you have this possibility. So it enables the author to continue to learn from his or her play, which is what we do all the time. This is a huge change, and for that alone, to be able to publish on demand, whether the acting edition is printed out or, Jeff says that actors are going to use their iPads. I can't imagine that, but maybe they will. But be able to have the theater have the updated version and to know that a new version is out and in a sense communicate with the author is a great advantage. Potential disadvantages my colleague Jeff can talk about.
I can talk about some of the advantages and the disadvantages. This arose for me because I started getting letters from my publishers. I've got plays published by Samuel French, Dramas Play Service, Play Scripts, Northwestern University Press, and there's somebody else. MTI, I don't know. I've got a lot of different things. And I'm starting to get notices about, will you please sign this writer so that we can make something available electronically. Well, I don't want to sign a writer yet until it's all been shaken out, until I know if there are industry standards of some sort, there's what my rights are, what their rights are. I also don't want to sign a writer if it means, for instance, here's one thing that's an unintended consequence. I've got an anthology of plays that's published by Northwestern University Press. If they put out an e-edition, why on earth would an acting edition be, why should somebody have an acting edition of the same play? Or if their acting editions are coming out, why would anybody ever produce, in an e-version? Why would anybody ever come out with a library edition of an anthology of plays again? Now, so that has to be shaken out. Another thing is something that Arthur talked about, which is terribly exciting, is that there's sometimes not just one version of a play. For instance, A.R. Gurney wrote a play called Sylvia, and there's one scene in which the language is very rough. And there are people who wanted to do the play, but the one scene in the park is a very hard scene for certain audience. So he wrote a GP version of that, or is it PG? I don't know. General practitioner. So anyway, this gives him the opportunity. This gives him the opportunity to oh, you want to license the PG version, or there are different versions of, say, Grease now out. There's the version that we know that's on Broadway. There's a version that was the original version that was done in Chicago, which is much rougher, which was just revived in Chicago, and some people want to do the rough version. And then there's a version that's suitable for high schools. So you have all of these things, plus something that Arthur and I are both interested in is the idea of, this opens up the possibility of FAQs. If you're having production after production of the same play, the same questions are going to keep coming up, and people keep asking you questions about the play. Well, why have to crank out the same answers to the same questions? Why not be able to post online, this school asked me about this, or this theater asked me about that. and build up a body of FAQs, answers to questions. No, you may not take an intermission there, for instance. Stuff like that. So we have all sorts of interesting issues. Arthur says he doubts that the actors are going to be carrying iPads in rehearsal. I don't doubt it at all. The question is how are
they are.
Yeah. The question is how will they make notes in those editions and still keep everybody on the same page as they're in rehearsal. I don't know if the technology is here for people to put those kinds of notes in yet. Yeah. So, but then if when one actor adds something in notes, is that going to make the page longer? Which means that you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we've got all sorts of standardization, which has got to kick in. I don't think that it makes any sense for each house to have their own standards, because it means that actors and writers would have to adjust to different standards at every house. You know, it's like all websites are done on HTML. There's a standardized language there. I don't see why there should be. Anyway, so these are some of the issues that came up. The other question is, I'm getting a new program from a new edition of WordPerfect 6, which has as one of its features the ability to instantly convert to something which can be uploaded to Amazon and sold on the Kindle. You know, if I know how to market, why on earth do I need a publisher? I gather there are reasons why I would need a publisher, but if my word processing program is going to give me perfectly adequate material to be able to upload to Amazon, and I could collect the entire royalty, you know, what are the publishing houses going to give me that I can't get on my own?
Well, let's talk to Ken and Michael about. You brought up two concerns. One is the acting versus trade editions, and the other one is why not self-publish. And I never thought I'd say this, but the acting versus trade edition is actually the easier problem, it would seem. Do you guys have thoughts on that? This must have come to the fore in your respective companies already.
Sure.
Michael?
Let's make a few distinctions, first of all, between a digital file and an e-book. There are standards in e-books, and they're different based on the distribution platform. So if you're on Amazon, you have the Mobi format. If you're on Barnes & Noble, you have the EPUB format, and the EPUB format is the digital standard for e-books. It's an open source digital standard. So I also want to add another twist on that, which is digital rights management, DRM. So DRM is applied on top of an EPUB format to protect the play from being distributed freely. So it's not the same thing as like a PDF. And there's no bilateral communication. So the idea that you can, for example, make a change and have it instantly proliferate around the world doesn't exist. It's much more similar to buying an acting edition, and then you have the acting edition, and then that's when the download ends. So if you make changes to an EPUB, somebody would have to go and re-download it again or repurchase the EPUB again. So it's not. Sure.
It isn't that you haven't downloaded it, but if you are downloading the current version of this play, or you are getting it as print on demand, and now there are changes to it, then the current version is now an updated version. Why is that not possible to be published either on demand or to be available to a theater to download it on their iPad?
It is possible. The problem that sometimes occurs is that certain members of a troupe will download one version and then you update it, and then other members get the other version, and now you have mismatched
So
versions.
it'd be pretty easy.
Then you have the Indians 2.3. Indians 2. Yeah.
But they have to purchase it. That's
They would have to purchase the new version unless
They bought a
very
license which
cleverly
allowed
you
them
buy
to.
a 10-year subscription to that play and you are able to get the update.
The technology for that doesn't exist.
Well, this is a reason that playwrights will be very hesitant to sign anything that commits them down the line, because, for me at least, the only real advantage is to be able to update your plays and go back and correct mistakes that are in the acting editions of my plays now.
You know, that ability exists. I'm just trying to add some complexity to it. It's not a bilateral communication thing. You can't make an update and just immediately have it.
Oh, no, that I understand. Somebody has it, and if I want to get a script from you,
Yeah.
and I sign a contract, I want the current version.
Yeah.
I could possibly say, could I see the previous version too? I mean, could I choose which they are, or what have you got? You're dealing with the author, but it's there, and you've controlled it, and it's no more costly to send version 5.4 than 5.3 or 5.2. You have these versions. This is the version, this is the public domain, this is the parental control version.
Let me qualify that again. Why would you assume it's no more costly? In other words, every time you have a transaction, there's a cost involved. Every time you convert an EPUB to a different, when you make revisions to an EPUB, it's the same thing as making revisions to a play. You're not producing books and inventory, physical inventory, but the same work goes into it. So there are costs involved.
Well, it's a minimal cost, because what you're doing is electronically there is a change to the script. There is the script. And the advantage to the authors and the advantage to producing organizations is they can get the current version. So while it would cost something, everything costs something. It costs something to get down here by subway. But it's minimal compared to hiring a horse to drive.
We haven't found that to be true so far. And
Ken, what's your experience?
Well, that will be a major
You
problem.
play at Apple, right?
Well, I think the flexibility issue, which I think is where you're saying here, is something I'd like to just draw a distinction. The world of even printing print books nowadays is not the world of, oh my God, we got to print 5,000 copies, we put it up on some shelf in a warehouse, and it's going to take 20 years to work from it, and you can't make a change to it for a net, right? Okay, that's gone.
Right.
The days of that in the print world are gone. Okay, so there's actually, from our perspective, whether it be print on demand or whether it be an EPUB, it's now a much more flexible file. So our goal is that they match, right? We don't. You get on and you buy a print book, it needs to match the ebook version, right? There is the current version of the play. So absolutely, in theory, because there is no tangible property, it's an easier update, but quite frankly, it's the same as updating the print book for us nowadays. In other words, you want to update it, absolutely. I can't tell you how many in revision titles we have right now, because authors are like, oh my God, I just want to fix the scene. I finally know what to do. And so great, so we've opened the gates on that. It's a different world. What else? I'm sorry. Where do we want to go now?
The thing that occurs to me, because I'm thinking, is when I buy software, if there's a new version of the software that's going to be issued, there's something within the software that says, hey, there's a new version, do you want to update? Your license says that you can have 3 updates, and I have updates. I don't see why, if one is able to similarly download a script and there's a new version, that notice wouldn't go to the purchasers.
Great. What you're asking for, I think, is a subscription-based reading service, is what you're asking for. What this is, and what Michael is aptly describing, is these are actual products that someone downloads, keeps on their device, and there's no more interaction. And this is just the way it's set up. This is, I mean, Random House and Stephen King, and this is the way it is. Okay, so that model is a very interesting model. I couldn't agree with you more in terms of this subscription, open kind of thing.
You subscribe to the play, and when there's a new version, you're instantly notified you can download it.
A traditional ebook is not that. A traditional ebook is a product that's bought, and it's not going to change until you buy the new version. Great.
Well, I've read Jonathan Loma's, some of his list of clients, so I know you have the power to make the future. So what kind of, given these kinds of tensions and some of the things that you probably have to negotiate, again, we didn't quite address the trade versus acting editions or the self-publishing issues. Obviously, self-publishing would present a problem for not only the publishers, but agents. Could you be relying essentially on an honor code at best, if you were included?
Well, someone would still have to negotiate, the deal between the client and, say, Apple. So
Right.
we wouldn't be the ones out in the cold, but we need the publisher.
Yeah.
I mean, people often say, well, why can't the clients just talk directly to Apple? And the reason is that we need 2 things. The client needs 2 things from the publisher. They need the promotion that the publisher invests in, does heavily, to sell the book, advertising it, and what they need is the trade edition. And the publisher is, we're getting to a place where there's between a dozen and 2 dozen authors who can still get a trade edition book. And in a way, it's the payment for giving over the e-rights. because they've got to be sold now as a bundle. You know, you're going to only dispose of both things. A publisher's never going to say, fine, we'll do your anthology, but you don't want to give those e-rights, that's fine. And by the way, for years we were able to say to publishers, we were able to hold them off and say, we're not giving e-rights, it's a outre, it's a strange part of the business, it's not important, and we could get rid of that easily. But now it's such a substantial amount of what they sell that we have to give it.
Did you say that e-publishing, the electronic publishing rights, were something the author is, in your experience, willing to give in exchange for still having a print book?
Yeah, because for many of my authors, the most important thing is that book on the shelf. To be able to walk into the drama bookshop and see an anthology of their plays, you know, or their latest play that they had on Broadway. That's still very important to them. And it's going to be very hard for a publisher to put that out without the ebook rights.
It's important because, as Arthur says, actors are still going to have to rely on hard copies. It has a certain accessibility that hasn't been replaced yet, or it's important because that's the way we grew up, and that's how we measure the accomplishment.
I'd be speculating, but I think that there is an emotional feeling that one has seeing their work of art in concrete form available to people. And when we talk about a work of art created by pixels and dots, it doesn't have the same feeling. Now, in the pocketbook, of course, it's going to be more important because, you know, you talk to the next generation of kids coming up and they don't care about their collection on the shelf. You know, that was how we defined ourselves. This is who I am. Look, I've curated this collection of books, this set of albums. This is who I am. They don't care about that. They don't care about having anything. It's why would you ever go back to something? You know, you're going to pay $24 for something that you only might read. You're almost certainly never going to go back to it. I'm talking about a hardcover book.
Yeah.
And it's going to take up space when you're done. We weigh that against having this thing in your device. And by the way, you could have the Library of Alexandria in that one device and never have to worry about anything else.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going. We're going to a bookless world.
And increasingly, we're going to be storing the stuff that we buy in the cloud, so we don't even have to keep it on our. We just so wherever we have Wi-Fi. Oh, I want to read this. I've already bought it. Ooh, it's there, and so we don't even have physical possession of works of art anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
A clarification. When someone agrees to produce, they want to produce a play that you are controlling, stock and amateur. When they get the electronic version, are they downloading it and also getting an acting edition bound copy, or is it just electronic and do they print it out for themselves? If they want to do the old-fashioned way and hold the script in hand, what do they get?
There is no requirement for them to buy a physical copy. Right now, there are going down the road. We may experiment with bundling, where you get the e-version and the print version. You know, we can experiment with that. But right now, we're seeing the ebooks are being bought to peruse, and then once you actually get cast in the show and you do it, then you buy a print copy as well to hold on stage and highlight the lines. Again, that's coming to be able to read off of a digital reader. It's just not there yet. And I think, you know, years from now, it will be much more common. Again, I have been in the classroom and I have seen a high school student do an entire Shakespeare piece from their iPhone. So it can happen. It's just right now what we're seeing is it's a perusal versus there's still majority need the hard copy.
I wanted to ask Tom, you have, from your perspective, you probably see how these new copyrights are being spliced up, these new ways of thinly splicing copyright are developing. Cloud, e-publishing, that's probably going to be a differentiation. Can you speak to that a little bit about what your clients are dealing with?
Well, everybody's dealing with the question of electronic rights and how that's going to be handled. I have to say that the reluctance to get into electronic publishing that I kind of hear expressed here is not my general experience in general book publishing, where it's pretty much been embraced. At worst, it's a necessary evil. Now there may be some real, unintended consequences, as has been mentioned, that we are, getting into a world where, we may be letting, the genie out of the bottle, or Pandora's, box may be opening up in terms of getting our stuff out there and out of our control. You know, and of course the question, you know, is often posed rhetorically, is the book publishing industry, you know, in a position analogous to that of the record business in about 1995? You know, and are we going to drive off that cliff by? I think not. I think that that first of all, you know, we've had the opportunity to learn from the mistakes of the record business. Also, you know, what was mentioned over in the green room, that the fact that the law is always behind the technology, and, you know, or the more positive way of looking at it is that it's constantly adapting to new technology. You know, until there was a printing press who needed copyright law at all. You know, until there were mass media who needed a right of publicity. You know, it was really you know, it would be a right that nobody could exploit. But I think the law has been, you know, catching up. You know, remedies and also, you know, the Apple experience. You know, the fact that Apple is now the most profitable, you know, company in the world. And a lot of that is from selling digital music files. You know, that was all about legally
giving people a
you know,
legal avenue.
Finding you know, a price that people were willing to pay rather than steal it. Make it convenient enough that people will pay the 99 cents or the 89 cents rather than steal it, and then you can do good business.
I was going to say my reluctance, which you find surprised by. Part of my reluctance is reflected in what I see here as current e-publishing terms, which is that the terms are varying from house to house. Sam French is, according to this, author gets 25% of all.
That's all negotiable.
Okay, and then the Andromeda Play Service says,
That's what they're going to start with when they call you on the phone.
Jonathan, it's negotiable to Jeff and Arthur.
because
It's not negotiable to the other 6,000 members of the guild.
Well, it's 20% for some of them.
Yeah, and I don't mean that as a slam against.
If you're asking, is publishing going to be a buyer's market? Yes, there's always going to be a buyer's market. But if you have something that someone wants, you can test that market and you can move these numbers around. If someone really doesn't want what you have, it's better you know that before they buy it and don't sell it.
Arthur, yes.
I want to mention what I think is one of the real reasons why an author, even if you can self-publish, wants Samuel French, DPS, and TI, or whoever, and it has to do with police. Yeah. You self-publish your own play. Anyone gets it, and they're doing it, you don't know. Now, Samuel French and DPS, Thomas Pilsner, are not going out and monitoring every production. But, and I hope it's not just an illusion, but and there are actors who love writers and will let you know that if there is a production that is done in a university or a theater, they're charging admission, and they don't have the rights, they've just taken an edition. I like to believe that that you are never going to get another Samuel French play, you're not going to get a DPS play, and so that ability to make sure that the play is done and you charge admission and you're paying a royalty is an essential aspect of that.
We need them to buy the book too. And quite frankly, we need them to pay the licensing fee too. So absolutely.
This is why BMI and ASCAP, why they are able to do that. If you try to get around this, you may get away with it, but you can be in a lot of trouble.
Michael and then Jonathan.
One of the things as Porter we were saying, however, is that we run very regular reports, usually every week, and sometimes more often, which check all cast size orders of scripts and we cross-reference the licenses. So if there aren't, if there's a cast size order and there's no license, we go after them immediately. So this actually with e-plays makes it easier because everything's digital, it's already instantly recorded, so it makes it even easier for us when there's a cast size order of digital plays to go after and find out if they've secured a license or not.
When this first came up in the theater world in the last 2 or 3 years, the reluctance was based on the idea that, what if what playwrights wrote, the sweat of their brow became worthless in the cloud? That there'd be sacrificial cows. That this first generation of playwrights would be like Edgar Allan Poe, who died a pauper even though he was a bestseller in France because the copyright laws hadn't caught up and he wasn't getting royalties, but the people, 10 years later were all fine. That was the concern, and it was expressed in 2 ways. The first is that You'd have more unauthorized productions because, you know, if somebody calls Samuel French and buys 26 copies of The Great White Hope, you say to yourself, well, what's this cast size of The Great White Hope? I think it's 26. Well, we better check on this and get our license. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was printed copies. You know, what if somebody buys, you know, I don't want to leave you out, a one copy of Robert Sherwood's Idiot's Delight, which I think you guys sell, and the next thing you know, they print out 25 copies. They've essentially stolen 25 scripts for the cast members. And I think we're convinced now that both of those things have been solved, and that the Kindle traps the ebook in itself. You can't print out from the Kindle, and you're not going to be giving your Kindle away. And if you, I mean, it's just cost-benefit analysis. You're not going to be doing that. And although BPP is a problem because I think they sell PDF, that's a problem. And the other thing is that the internet, the technology that sort of gave people the ability to have, you know, the 13 Kindles by different addresses. I didn't know you can track it, but the internet gave us the ability to Google search the title of a play, and all you need is one person putting it in their church flyer that's online, and you know if you've got an unauthorized production. So the two things that were the biggest thing in the agent's mind for not doing this, the unauthorized productions and the scripts printed ad infinitum, both of those seem to have been surmounted, and with that, we can embrace it.
As long as you have a unique enough title to put into the search engine. I've run down a few unauthorized, including a production in Germany, where I was able to get dough from. But yeah.
Ken and Michael, are you guys comfortable of this switch to being businesses that will publicize and police? I mean, policing has been easier for you in the past, I think, than it is now.
No, I would say it's just the opposite, actually. It's,
with the search engines, it's easier to police?
well, first let me say that it's surprising how honest theater producers are. Most theater producers want to secure the rights and pay for the rights. There are a couple of bad apples out there, and frequently somebody who's disgruntled in a cast will report them to us. So as Arthur said, there's people policing on our side.
So there's actors who like authors,
Yeah.
and there's actors who hate their producers.
Either one works for us.
Either way, yes.
Someone always didn't get cast.
Yeah.
And the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's right.
So in addition to that, you know, our ability to run reports off all this digital data is much easier than it was in the past when everything was on paper, and you were writing down orders on paper and filling orders by paper. Now everything can be queried through databases, and we can create reports in literally 2-3 seconds that used to take a week to compile.
So, like, you know, 12 people buy Skin of Our Teeth. They're going to different Kindles. I mean, how can you see that that's all this? Those are the 12 people in the cast.
I'll give you an example. The play service will be launching new plays in probably early June, and one of the apps we use is called Scene Partner. It's an iOS app, which is for Apple operating system, and they have the way they divide their customers is either by actor or theater. So a theater can sign up with Scene Partner, and then what they can do is purchase a cast-size number of scripts, which then they give their actors the password to, and then the actors can download the script. So whenever there's a theater purchase, we get a report that tells us that that purchase has been made, and we can make sure that they've secured a license. Now, just because they make the purchase doesn't mean they don't intend to secure a license. Sometimes they'll purchase in advance and then secure the license afterwards. So it's not always a matter of catching somebody, it's just a matter of reminding them. We know you bought these, you need to apply for a license if you intend to do a production.
You're such a good one.
And when they print out the version, they print it out on a hard copy.
It's disabled to print it.
Yeah. So it's going to be on the iPad.
So how do they?
They got to read it from the device.
They either read it from the device or they buy the print edition if they get cast.
Right.
Okay, so when they're auditioning, they have it on an iPad.
Sure.
But then when they're cast and they're going to rehearsal,
Well, it would be up to them. I just actually got an email yesterday from a theater that wants to do their first production on Scene Partner. So, and they want to do it all on iPads. So people are transitioning to this new way, and I think they're excited about it. They're actually excited about
Maybe they
it.
break some of their iPads in rough and tumble scenes.
Apple certainly hopes so.
Yeah, that's right.
But in that situation, would it be the producer, or would the actor, this would be negotiated? There's an actor in production, and he says, if I'm cast, I want to be able to hold my one scene in my hand, or write my notes.
Right,
the
you may
theater
have a
has its own
cast.
iPads.
You may have a cast that half of them want to use a print book, and
Sure.
half of them want to use it.
I mean, ideally, it should be an option where you can.
We sell both. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to start getting down to some of the standards, and this is very lawyerly of me. It's very unartistic of me. You know, because that's people don't come to me for any artistic reasons. They only come to me for cold hard facts. Tom, can you speak a little bit about what are the standards for your basic novel? You seem to have said that your average book publishing, non-theater book publishing, it's embraced the electronic world. Are there standards in terms of percentage? I assume it's worldwide. Is the term in
Well, I
perpetuity?
heard
Or?
it sort of bandied around that 25% has become something of a standard. 25% of the publisher's gross, which would be, you know, after the 30% commission if it's
So
out
their
of
net.
Pardon?
It'd be their net.
Their net.
Well, it's something
Their
called
adjusted gross,
publisher's
is that?
gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so are we looking at the theater world approaching that model
No.
as well?
Well,
John?
I would be. Well, I mean, look, I'm going to take a very different position than my friend to my left, who has the worst deal of the people up here.
Let me
that he offers.
I just want to add one thing, though. That as
We'll get you over it.
As you said earlier, you know, of course, you know, everything's, you know, subject to negotiation and leverage. And, you know, if you're talking about, you know, John Grisham, or if you're talking about, you know, me, you know, we're not going to get the same terms.
We want 50% of the publisher's net for the author. We want 50% of it.
Is that what you're seeing?
So,
I mean,
it's what we've been getting.
we want that too.
It's what we've been getting. So if you have let's say that it's a $10 book.
Let me clarify, you can get that from trade publishers, right?
I'm talking about if you buy a script.
Oh.
This is what we want. We want, let's say it's $10. $3 goes to Apple off the top. And you got $7 left that goes back to the publisher. Now we want half that. We want that split 50-50. So basically we want 35% of what you paid for the book to go to the author, which is an increase from the 10% that the author used to get in retail publishing from the sales price. But we think the increase is justified because the publisher, frankly, isn't doing that much anymore beyond the advertising and beyond doing the trade edition. They don't have any manufacturing costs. The publisher has no warehouse costs. As you heard Mr. Dingledine say, they have no shipping costs, and they have no returns. I mean, you can return the book, but there used to be a cost associated with returns in that the publisher would destroy the book, which they don't have anymore. So it's essentially pure profit, and the 50-50 split comes from what we see in music publishing. And we think it should be in the author's pocket, not the publisher's.
Yeah, a few years ago, 10 years ago, that was a lot more common, say, in a trade book contract with a smaller publisher and a less well-known author, that you'd see that 50% rate for electronic.
Well,
let's
for some reason, I don't know why the publisher.
He's offering 40, so he's almost there.
Hold on. Let's give Bennett a chance to defend himself since he's here.
So no,
and then Michael.
Thank you, and I totally hear it. I totally hear it. I get it. I hear it. Two things I'd like to just kind of couch the conversation with. I think we have to look at the models here. DPS and Samuel French are taking two very different models right now.
Yeah.
We're taking a retailer model where all of our distribution is through the Apple iBook store. Soon it will branch out into Kindle. It'll go into the Nook. These are major retailers that offer huge distribution and huge visibility for the author's work. Every retailer will, as you mentioned, take between 30 to 40% of their retail cut, and that gets down to the publisher net, right? So that's why the comparison. I know we want to compare between the models. It's not a comparable model. It's a different model.
Well, DPS is doing theirs in-house, from my
Right.
understanding, yes?
Yeah,
How do you do that?
I
You just-
completely
you've
agree.
got the neighbor's kid on a computer, just pumping out the electronic.
No, it's me and my
It's the
staff.
distribution
Yeah.
model. It's
Yeah.
the distribution.
And I'm being facetious. I
No,
know,
no, yeah.
I know that
Yeah, no,
so what?
I want to come to Ken's defense as well.
Yeah.
They're very different models. Ken is, Samuel French is distributing through major retailers. The Play Service is distributing solely through our website and through a few select third parties, such as Scene Partner, the iOS app. So it's a very different model. Samuel French Plays, for example, will be available on the Kindle eventually, and the Play Service Plays will not be available for the Kindle. So they're more of a, they're taking a very different approach.
Well, then, the question I was talking about, trade versus acting edition, is different depending on whether a play is published with French or with you. With you, it would make sense for a play of mine that's published with DBS to then be able to also sell a trade edition through electronic publishing, but there isn't any reason to do it through Samuel French, because you're going to be selling it through Kindle anyway.
Well, it also depends, I mean, as we move into this brave new world, it also depends on what you call an ebook. So, for example, and I'll let Ken talk about French contracts, but in our contract, we're looking solely for the acting edition rights, essentially. It's an e-acting edition. We're not looking for an enhanced ebook, which might include audio or video or interactivity of some kind. Maybe you have the FAQs that you were talking about directly on the book. There's all kinds of possibilities where it becomes more of a multimedia experience. So that's not what the Play Service does. That's not our function. Our function is to provide a script and to license that play and collect licensing for the author and the agent on behalf of them. So that's our role, and that's what we want to do. And if a trade publisher wants to publish a trade edition of their play, we have no problem with that.
But the trade publisher might have a problem not having electronic
Well,
rights.
Exactly. Yeah, they will, and they do. We've had those conversations with the trade publishers,
Yeah.
and because
How do those go?
we would love. Well, I mean, we would love nothing more for them to coexist. But I get it. When you
Possible they can.
I think. But like in the iBook store, you have the TCG version of Race, and then you have the Samuel French Acting Edition version of Race. And yes, from the consumer's perspective, they're pretty equal, right?
Which
and
one's
ours,
cheaper?
And ours probably sells for $9.95, and theirs probably sells for $18.95, or what? There is that aspect. So that's the other thing you have to realize here is that we are intentionally keeping our price points at that Acting Edition price point, which also affects the whole dollars and cents of it, right?
But what I'm saying is then there's no motivation for TCG to publish a trade
Right.
edition.
So-
If they know that the acting edition is going to be cheaper, then they do the trade edition.
Right, absolutely. So we are very sensitive to that because this is not about us taking, TCG needs to still exist. You know what I mean? They need to still do trade publications. One quick thing I would like to just say, of the 6,500 titles that we publish, there are trade publications for about 300 of those titles. So this does not affect the vast majority of the titles that we publish. We are often the only publication of this. And so again, I just want to
So it's keeping scripts
throw that
alive.
out there. Absolutely. And quite frankly, if there's a relationship with a trade edition publisher, we will sell their e-play on our website if the trade publisher doesn't want us to, it gets in the way of our e-acting. Again, we just want to make the content available to the consumer. That's where we're coming from. But yeah, I mean, it is an issue that concerns the trade publishers for sure.
Yeah.
Can we talk about cost?
Yeah, let's talk
Can we
about
talk about cost? Let's talk about cost.
Yeah.
Seriously, because
Because the assumption is no more warehouses, no more
I know
phones,
it's
no
not
more
paper
phones.
and ink.
So
See,
go ahead.
there will be some creativity.
This mythology is sort of
That's right.
involved in their
Listen, it's still not as bad as the music industry. So
Nothing's as bad as the music.
No. But let's talk about cost.
This mythology is sort of I call them unsubstantiated rumors that the cost of an e-play is somehow less expensive than producing an acting edition, and we haven't seen that to be the case so far. Now it may prove down the road that that's the case, but so far the costs have been quite high, and there's the
How so?
conversions. First of all, conversions are extremely complicated. The idea that you can click your play and work perfect, have it come out a perfect ebook It's just not going to happen. It may be, it may suffice for you, but it's not going to be up to our standards. Our standards are very high. The ebook format, the EPUB format, has no provision, for example, for simultaneous dialogue. There's no provision in it. It has to be hand done.
They didn't know what to do with it. Apple was, it really freaked them out. They didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah, and in part because you have to understand it's a reflowable format. There isn't a fixed page width. So depending on your device, the text has to be able to stretch depending on how wide the device is. So it's much more complicated than it is converting, say, a novel where there's one paragraph of text.
Are these things like with the, now in the music industry, one thing that was famous in music contracts is when the industry was transitioning from cassette tapes to CDs, they insisted that in their contracts, part of the musician's royalty, they would take it, there's sort of a clawback on the musician's royalty saying, well, you have to pay for that conversion from cassette to CDs, because we had to build new companies, we had to build new machines.
Are you asking if we're doing that?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a parallel that you're saying, well, there is cost, because there's a conversion cost, and I'm wondering if once these problems are figured out, do those costs go away?
No.
Because there are still music contracts that have that clawback for transitioning to CDs.
They don't go away because the technology continues to evolve. So the catalog, the digital catalog, has to evolve with it. And we don't know where that's going yet, but I guarantee you every 5 years there's a revolution in technology, and we're going to have to convert all the titles we've converted already into some different format.
Literally next month, Apple could say, the file that you sent us before, it doesn't quite work right now. We need it in this new file format, or this tweaked file format. How many times have you updated WordPerfect? Yeah. So Apple needs it. So this is an incredible maintenance to keep these files current for the retailers, for whatever device. The other thing is, this is a new product. This is a whole new, we have a whole library now that we must manage. This is a whole new library to manage. Yes, the content's the same, but to keep the content the same between to keep the distribution, there's channels to manage, there's metadata to gather. You could sell a print book and you could know 5 things about it and you could sell it. Now, to sell an ebook, you have to know 25 buckets of information that gather and must be continually monitored and updated and maintained. And this is not, I mean,
so
it's a labor.
You're saying the costs are the same?
I don't think we know.
No. I'm not saying the costs are the same. No, be very clear. I've never said that it's not, for example, right now, an average print book is about $2.35. That's the cost. To create, maintain, distribute the print book, $2.35. The average ebook right now is $1.35. So yes, it's different. However, it's not nothing. It's not nothing. There are costs. The expense to store it in a digital format is an expense. It's less of an expense than to put it on a shelf in a warehouse, but there is still an expense.
Two questions. In fact, just since I said that, I can do only one. The first one is probably the most important. When an author submits a new play, there's a new play that they've just written, so we don't already have it. Do they submit it to you in Word, or Jeff, you use Word or a PDF? Or do they change their format so it's more adaptable for you?
Well, we get submissions in all different ways. Sometimes from the older authors, they're typewritten, and sometimes they're in, for instance, final draft format. Sometimes WordPerfect, sometimes Word. RTF, PDF, all different kinds.
And what do you prefer them in?
Well, for us, it doesn't really matter because we have to typeset them first, and so they go into a typesetting program like Quark or Adobe typesetting program, and then from the typesetting program, then they're converted after they're typeset into the EPUB.
Because I know that for most authors in this country, unlike in Britain, the character's name is in the middle, and then you have the stage directions underneath the second line. But that in the acting editions, they use the British format with the character name in the left. Is the author responsible for changing that, or you just take the script as it is and you convert it?
That's the typesetting process. So what happens during the typesetting process is the script is submitted to us, usually in one of these formats we just discussed. It goes to our typesetter, who typesets it according to our style guide. All the stage directions are set according to our style guide, unless there's some request that something, Susan Lori Parks, for example, help disregard our entire style guide, which is fine. If somebody creates their own style guide, it's sometimes very hard to replicate that in an EPUB. That's another issue.
Yes.
For example, if you've written, most people probably don't write in iambic pentameter, but if you've written a verse play and your pentameter line finishes on the next and you've got an indent, you can't do that on an ebook because the screen again reflows. So there are some interesting challenges.
And the second question, which comes from that, has to do with Smith and Krause, who published on demand scripts that are in rehearsal, and I think that they do that from PDFs. So they're able to do it very quickly. So my terrible question to you both is why not save costs and why not print acting editions that are done the same way from PDFs, because they're different from the trade publications. The actors want a script, and they would prefer, I know, that they would prefer, the regular print size with the actor's name in the middle, where they can put all of their.
There are a couple of reasons. The first one is that print on demand is a very expensive model. So when you can offset print, if we're talking about print books, when you can offset print 5,000 units, you bring the cost of the book down substantially. If you're printing on demand, you're talking maybe $4 per book sometimes. Also, if you use that particular format, you're adding maybe 50 more pages to the book, so that becomes more expensive as well. So it's a cost.
Because a lot of what I said in the beginning of my assumption was that since it's electronic publishing, it should be fairly simple. You get a script. Here is the script. It's in a PDF format. There it is. We can download it. We all download scripts that we've seen in PDF format. We read them. We read novels. We read plays on our iPads. I don't care if I'm an actor reading it that it looks in this format. I want it to be able to be actable, which pretty much is the old-fashioned way that studio publishing, printing used to do. Studio duplicating. Name in the middle, there it is, dialogue. Different. And that's hard for me not to see that it might not really save the cost and make it faster and easier, but I understand.
There is a standard. You may type your scripts very well, and you may be very organized, and it may be very clear, but that's not necessarily maybe the norm. And so it is also our job to create a usable product that's in a consistent, recognizable format for our customers.
But the scripts that I write, and Jeff, in that, it is in the standard format, and it is what is used when the actors do a first production. They're getting their script directly as I did it, they're printing it out, and that's what they do. Very easy for them to work from. Lots of space to add in lines, stage direction, stage manager can put in stuff on the side. That's a very simple way, and you haven't been in rehearsal very often to see actors pulling their hair out trying to work from the acting edition.
Interesting. Yeah, why has the acting edition evolved to what it is? You know what I mean? In terms of, I go back to how it's always,
It's probably, to do it in that format, there's fewer pages, and so it's cheaper to do.
Exactly.
But it's not.
But it's not aesthetically the same experience.
And it's not as easy to work from as an actor.
Right. There's also, if you're talking about an ebook and you have centered character tags, you have to remember the screen size is vary. We don't know what the screen size is going to be. So if somebody's working on an iPhone, an iPhone where the screen is this big, they're going to get 3 character tags, and that's a page.
That's their choice.
That will not work very well.
We have about 5 minutes before we start a Q&A.
But
And I wanted Arthur to ask you,
this is my renegade comment. It seems to me that this world is absolutely prepared for someone to come in with a format for acting editions, which inexpensively create acting editions for actors that are in the format that they're most familiar with. And it is possible. You've chosen a format to match the format that you've been using in the past. Maybe because of the potential electronic publishing, you can go to a more actor-friendly and writer-friendly format, and that is.
But actors who only do stock and amateur will only be familiar with the DPS French
Their agents will
standard.
show them that if
They
they
don't have
really do
agents.
well,
They don't have
will
agents.
move
The
it forward.
majority of people in Anchors Equity Screen Actors don't have agents. and
Well, then they can be printed in a different, you can, it's not hard for us to reformat our plays, putting characters on the left. You can do this, you want this version, you want the British version, or you want the American style version.
And quite frankly, the way we publish now and tag certain things, it's not hard for us to redo the format because all your characters are now tagged in the character field. And we can just move them. You want them in the center? Okay, fine. We move them in the center.
Like a word style sheet.
Exactly, like a word style sheet.
Change
So,
where they go.
hey,
All
the
the
next
elements.
one, let's try it. I mean, we have no, you know, let's,
You know what I think what you're saying here? This is the beginning of an era, and it's a really crucial era. And information and the generation of information and learning about it is the most important element because we're moving into something, and it's going to change the way people read, see, distribute,
Access.
literature, access. So I think that it's wonderful to have this kind of discussion, and in 6 months the discussion will be different.
Yeah.
In 6 more months, it's an evolving form, and we can't. It won't be fixed in stone quickly.
Let me ask a hypothetical question. So I've got a few plays published by DPS, and these plays are not available on in Kindle formats. And so, what's to keep me from reformatting them in Kindle format, piggybacking on the publicity that I've gotten from your catalog, selling my own copies of my for Kindle of those plays?
That would be your prerogative. We don't recommend it. Working with Amazon is not fun.
But that would be your contract.
I would, it depends on your contract,
you know,
your
people-
contract allows you to do that.
People
Well,
say,
that's
all the
with
time-
But you say that you're not distributing
Yeah.
stuff on Kindle, and if I think, oh, well, I could
Well,
sell my books at.
Okay, let's distinguish.
That's what J.K. Rowling did. She did not dispose of e-rights, so she
If you were to sign an e-play writer and ask us to represent the e-play rights, then it would be breach of contract.
Yeah.
But lacking that, that would be your prerogative to do that.
My understanding is that the publishers are more concerned with the licenses for the live performances than the actual sale of the individual text.
That's right.
Well, one of the things that I'm interested in is the idea of being able to get people interested in the scripts. You know, for instance, if I write a new play and I put it up for like people can download it to their Kindles for $1 to see whether or not they want to put on the new play, and then subsequently after it's been produced, there'll be a revised version, and then I'll want an acting edition. This might be a cheaper and easier way than my sending physical copies out or individual files to various different theaters.
So Jonathan has about 2 minutes before he's got to bolt out the door, and I promised him he would be able to do this. So before you go, I do want to get your advice, and Tom, your advice as a lawyer, to our membership. These are people who are at varying levels of their career. Some of them, a lot of them have agents, a lot of them don't. And someday, somebody's going to send them an email or call them on the phone and say, "We want your e-publishing rights," and they're going to be in the moment.
Well,
and that's always stressful. What do I do?
I would
What do
just
I
say,
do?
remember that nobody up here would have jobs if it weren't for you. And that it's great to be grateful, but never just sign something you get in the mail. Because the thing is going to be the absolute base contract that is really in favor of the person giving it to you. Have the dignity that needs to come with authorship. You created something where before there was nothing. And don't let it get devalued because so many people are dying to have something published.
But nobody's asked them before to publish something of theirs.
Well, now they have, and it's time to push back and ask for something more favorable. I'm not saying do what all of us are used to. Engage in a negotiation. Test the market. Test the market to see where you are. Because some of these sample contracts that I think you have handouts for, I mean, they're this one on top. It's badly drafted. I mean, 20% is too low. I don't know what this database is. I don't know how they're selling it. They want everything.
There's a lot of we understand. It's understood that you will get proper billing, and it's understood that you will get statements, but it's not in there.
Right.
So,
Right, and it looks like Smith & Krause's actually. I know the name's not on here, but I think that's what it is. There's just not enough info. And something that is good here is it's not on a proportionate basis. I mean, my problem with this for my clients might be different than your problem if you're starting out. I don't think Edward Albee or Terrence McNally or A.R. Gurney should engage in a contract that's proportional. Where there's 50 monologues, I think the ones that won Pulitzer Prizes or that have been done on Broadway should have a pro rata, should be getting pro rata a little bit more because maybe they've earned it over their time and their work. That's something like that.
Tom, how would you advise the people who aren't going to go to Cowan, Leawood, Flatman to hire an attorney?
Well, one question I would have for you, is that something that the Dramatists Guild offers?
Well, we have this
contract
panel
review.
Yeah, the Business Affairs.
And the Songwriters Guild does.
Well, yeah, we do contract review and we compare, but since we're not a union, we can't represent individual members.
Sure.
What I can do is I can make notes saying, here's how the contract you were handed compares to industry standards. Now, with electronic publishing, that presents a problem.
There
are no industry standards to compare it to.
Yeah.
I can't make strong comments about Samuel French like Jonathan can because it's still blurry up in the air. I can't say too much bad about DPS because it's the Wild West.
Right.
Well, look, what do you say to people?
Authors, especially authors without leverage, without a strong bargaining position, those authors making bad deals is such an old story that it's actually built into the copyright law that
right.
If you make a grant of rights, now it's terminable. It's not terminable for 35 years, but it's terminable. You can say, or you or your heirs, if you're not around anymore, can say, okay, publisher, we want those rights back, or else you make a new deal with us that gives us, a fair return on this work that may have become very valuable and, much more valuable than anybody anticipated it would be when the contract was made. But, I know that's sort of small comfort. I think I would just, nice for your heirs maybe, but I would reiterate though that everything is negotiable. That no, you can push back. You may think you're powerless, that you have very little leverage, but you do have some leverage. They're interested in publishing your work, and they're not going to give you their best deal off the top of the, off the top.
I think that when we're further down the line, and when we have a history of what the deals are, we can compare ourselves to what other people have got and so forth. Right now, we don't have those indices of comparison. There are no objective correlatives for us.
So Jeff, that brings up a good point. That's the last question I wanted to ask you and Arthur. There was a time when you guys were beginning playwrights, beginning authors, and you were offered contracts, and you were pressured to sign contracts that maybe you look back on today and you say, "Wow, I can't believe I signed that." What kind of when the phone rings in my office, I hear a lot of desperation. Somebody wants to publish my play. Somebody wants to produce my play, but they'll only do it if I give up these things. And I say, well, that's not standard. Well, what do I do? Well, you've got all I can say is you've got a choice to make. But I'm not an author. I don't know empirically what they've been through. You guys do. What would you tell them?
Well, it's one of the reasons why I was interested in this panel is that I don't know what the new standards are when it comes to e-publishing. I don't know what to hold out for. I mean, I'm in the odd situation. Most people group their plays with one publisher or another. As it happens, some of my stuff's with French, and some of my stuff's with DPS, and some of my stuff's with, other different places. And I don't, at this point, haven't figured out where it's to my advantage, my greatest advantage to have my stuff. I'm in this new system. It hasn't shaken out. This comparison is useful, but I didn't know, for instance, that DPS isn't going to be distributing to Amazon until just this conversation, and that Samuel French is distributing to Amazon. And that since I would like to be able to have my friends buy my scripts on Amazon, that may impact something. May.
The advice I would give if you give to writers I've met is if you're not a member of the Dramatists Guild, join the Dramatists Guild. Because you need to go to find out, and very often our agents don't even know what is going on out there? What is the standard? And this is very important, that in fact nobody knows now what the standard is. So knowledge is power. So for a writer to know there is no standard right now, and then you can come into the guild and let me know what it is. Let me try to make an informed decision. What do I do? What is possible in this? For a writer having an offer for a play the first time, oh my God, they want me to do the play and they only want me to wash the walls once a week. And are they giving you money? No. I'm going to pay for the actress to come out to it.
Yeah.
You know, but it's my play. And your heart breaks because they want it done. So you need a neutral, knowledgeable source to inform you on what is there, and then you make a decision. And in the guild, many years ago, when we were battling with the Lord Theatres, we had many very powerful members of the Dramatist Guild who got that through because they were willing to say, if you don't do this deal for all playwrights, you can't do my play. And that was amazing, because the playwrights were saying, you can do my deal, but that deal has to be, I can go above it, but there has to be a standard which the Dramatist Guild members will have. And it took enormous courage for playwrights to do that. So that was because they had information.
Yeah.
So just this, and then maybe the guild then began to publish or online. What is the current information? What are the comparisons between DPS and French and Smith and Krauss? What are the disadvantages? What are the pros and cons? How is it evolving? You have to get the information, and that's what it's about.
And I'm hoping that one of the things that we would get is an augmented version of the handout here, so that we have a greater basis of understanding. Well, if I get a bid, if I have a new play and I have a bid from French and I have a bid from Drama's Play Service, aside from who's offering more, what different services will be attendant upon going with one or the other, and which do I judge as to be more to my advantage with this particular play? Right now, I have got very little way to determine that.
Yeah.
But also, I hope that out of something like this, that it evolves for unions, for DPS, for all the organizations. You understand? And this is what playwrights want. And this is how to do it. If you want to sell the plays, you want to produce the plays, you want to help playwrights. Nobody disputes that. This is not, doing various film deals where you think I'm going to get out of here before they stick a knife in my back. No, we love you guys, and we know that you're there and you police it and you care about theater and you do this, so it's very important. So how to make it the best for you and us and everyone is we're feeling our way in.
And the other thing is, you're not working in isolation. You're in an ecology where there are various different outfits that have to coexist, and they can't undercut each other.
Right.
So that's why I keep saying that some kind of standard has to evolve that we can understand.
Yeah, and I do want to make clear that when Arthur is talking about how the Dramatist Guild members discussed what the standards were at the Lord level and made certain demands, we're not talking about any sort of antitrust issue. What we're talking about, I mean, he's not talking
No,
legalese.
let me say what it was. This was complete, what was so phenomenal, was this was writers individually saying, I believe in the guild and I think that we should all get this, and they did it. They didn't have to do that.
Right. The guild was able to provide the information of, this is the standard of behavior that we've seen in producers in the past. And if you see this changing, then you know that that's not to your advantage, and you know it doesn't have to be that way. That's sort of the more legalese version of what Arthur was saying.
It is actually very, very important, because we are not a union, we are a guild, and the guild depends upon writers believing that the strength comes from the members, and you don't have to do that. And some people stood up and said, this is what we believe. And it worked.
Yeah, there are people who said, I would rather not have a production than to set a precedent that screws my fellow dramatists.
And that's something that I tell a lot of our very beginning writers when they have their first contract, and they say, well, I think I want to do this anyway. And I don't see how it's going to affect me, because maybe, this is the first play, and I have 5 more plays, lined up to go. So it's really not going to affect me in the long term. And I always say, Yeah, but it might affect the next author at that theater.
Yeah.
And that's really what the Dramatist Guild tries to be about, is affecting, how you affect each other as a community of authors. We're going to start the Q&A. Miss?
Yes, thank you all so much for being here. Actors are loving the app Scene Partner. Scene Partner app, I understand that they can highlight their lines, they can erase their lines, they can use it for memorizing, you can speak the other person's lines to them. Shows for the Fringe are already being rehearsed with everybody using an iPad. It's already here. So obviously at Clyburn Park, Other Desert Cities, these plays, the newest plays coming out, will be available in those kind of editions, I assume. What about, for want of a better word, the backlist? What about the plays that were published 10 years ago, The Last Raid in Nibrock? When will those be available for people who are wanting to put it on Screen Partner?
Ask the author of the last.
I'll jump in there because it is very much of a pipeline. And right now we currently have about 715 titles in the iBook store right now that you can go in. We have about another, 200, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Joe, who's doing it all. We have about another 300 titles in the pipeline, so that we will have about, in the next 2 to 3 months, about over 1,000 titles available. We are making no distinction between the backlist and front list. Who's ever on board for e-publication is on board for e-publication. Doesn't happen overnight, as we've discussed. It's very much of a process, but any and all, absolutely any and all.
Michael?
We're rolling them out. Because we're doing everything in-house, it takes some time. So we're rolling them out, and we're moving forwards and backwards simultaneously. And I think it bears mentioning that Last Train to Nibrock is in digital format, so it's easy for us. But a lot of the plays that are, say, 10 years old or older have never been set in a computer. So we have only the film at the printer and the hard copy of the book. So those plays have to be, again, this goes to cost. Those plays have to be retyped, retypeset, reproofread, and then converted to an EPUB, and then digital rights management software added on top of that. So it's a process, as Ken said.
This gentleman in the front.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I'm sure that this is already happening at the Guild, but it seems established writers, you must have started in some way a database of their negotiation processes and all the problems involved with getting this onto the internet and so forth. Because unlike a book, a poem, or an essay or something, once the script is there, it has to go out to actors, directors, designers, and so forth. Because it's not just the words, that's why it's a play. So I'm assuming that the established writers at the Guild, I don't know, you probably have already done this, started thinking a database of their experiences with what they've done so far, what they think might be fair, because then it could trickle down to people, and maybe they'll be different, you know what I'm saying, negotiation things. And so that way, you've got databases started so we can have some facts and we'll get to a point where there are standards.
We actually have an e-publishing committee. There you go. And Arthur and Jeff are spearheading that.
Now, if you update your work, say make significant changes, does that change the copyright date?
No. Interesting.
Tom should be able to answer that.
The word significant is the key. It would be a revision if if you correct some
couple of
typos
words,
and
that's
change
one
a
thing,
couple of words.
but if it's a scene, a whole scene,
Sure, then
it would change the copyright.
You could register a new copyright in the new version.
No, actually, what I wanted to say is on e-publishing.
Okay.
It's on e-publishing.
Well, e-publishing
really
copyright should
Because
follow.
it's easy to change on e-publishing.
Well, one thing you should remember is when you copyright a play, whatever you've submitted to the Library of Congress, that's the text that's copyrighted. Any subsequent revisions are copyrighted by a second application.
Well, we have to distinguish between registered copyright and common law copyright. The revisions are going to have common law copyright.
Right.
You have protection.
But it doesn't change the date.
Go ahead, Tom. Go. Yeah.
Well, it's actually it's not common law copyright anymore. It's copyright and copyright registration. They're two different things. Copyright subsists in any original work of authorship from the moment it's fixed in a tangible medium of expression. you have a federal copyright from that
Right.
moment.
No,
So if
right,
you write
right.
if you write a
Well, my
you know,
notes about the star.
there you go.
Born and
Right. You write a note to your significant other. You know, I'm attending a seminar at the Dramatists Guild. I'll be home probably at 8:30. There's something in the freezer. Put it in the oven. You own a copyright from the moment you fix that in the tangible medium of
Generally,
expression.
what you see in the book, when you see copyright 2008, copyright 2010, you have an initial copyright that was filed with the
Okay.
Library of Congress in 2008. Revisions were made, and in 2010, a second application was filed on copyright.
Okay.
But the important thing I would say to you is that, registration is a different thing, and also copyright notice, when you see copyright, 2007, so-and-so, is pretty much an irrelevancy.
Right.
It really doesn't
It lasts
matter
for your lifetime plus 70 years.
Since
So
we-
really, it's less the date that was written and more the date that you died.
Yes.
That's important.
Yes.
I want to add a couple of things. First of all, we have copyright on those. I'm from Abrams Artists. We put together the initial comparison.
We got permission.
Yes. So I'm just teasing. And we're going to continue to sort of look at the other things because of distribution. There's all kinds of other factors. The ability to pull back, the rights to a trade copy. I do want to say that I advise playscripts.com, their early part in terms of that the authors notified as soon as a copy is sold. They know what productions are coming up. There's total transparency. You get an email. One of the things that we also talked about was the idea of manuscript copies. They do that. You can get a copy either in a book edition or in a manuscript reversal draft, because I thought that was a really great idea too. And I would say that in terms of the setting of who sets the standards, I kind of have to agree with my departed friend there that I think the authors should be, setting the standards. So, sorry, Liz, I know you're going.
No, yeah.
Okay, in the back.
I've been working on a graphic novel for about the last 4 years. We're about to go on for electronic publishing. Essentially what we're going to be doing is going to Amazon and Barnes & Noble. We're doing it ourselves. It's a store buying thing. You mentioned that going with Amazon is no day, picnic. What exactly should I know that I'm about to get into? Either Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Well, first thing I would note is that the ebooks are still in their infancy. And I'm not sure how you're converting your graphic novel, but not to get too technical, but there's a file format called SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics, which is the best way to publish a scalable image, such as a graphic novel would be. And unfortunately, the EPUB format, while it, as an open source, supports that, the devices don't. So there's so many devices out there right now, from the Kindle to the Kindle Fire to the iPad to the Sony Reader to the Kobo Reader, and then there are apps which work on Android platform and work on the iOS and work on the Windows Mango platform. So there's just so many different devices right now. And that really goes to the standard that you guys are talking about. It doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist because each of the device makers is trying to carve out their own niche. And so while the EPUB format is a standard, how it displays on each device is different.
So in other words, if we deliver it to Amazon, let's say Photoshop, what have you, we can't just assume that they have their own format that they're going to transfer it into. We have to have that format ahead of time, or?
Well, this is a little off topic, but if you're publishing images, the PDF is the best way to go. Right now.
PDF, and send it to them. And this would be Barnes & Noble as well.
Yeah, if you want that.
Yes.
I have a comment. I just wanted to say that as a playwright, publishing is so important for me because getting plays produced is so hard. So you want your play to have a life. So publishing is a way that your play can have a life, at least in the literary world. So when I published my first play with our universe, I guess what was attractive to me is that they said it's not exclusive. You can publish with us, but you can publish with somebody else too. So I didn't feel like I was, someone was doing something to me that I couldn't get out of. And recently I've been asked to publish one of my plays with Indie Theater Now. And they're saying in 6 months, if you want to withdraw, you can. And so I guess I'm feeling like, okay, it's okay to do this because there's a sunset clause, or whatever you guys call it. But,
that's exactly how we're approaching the ebooks. Is we do not want anyone to be unhappy with having their book at Samuel Friend. We need you to be happy. That's what our goal is. We want you to want to have your book with us, right? So absolutely, you can pull it at any time. You can take it out of the ePlay program. You can go and put it on self-publishing platform as well. I mean, look, we're very confident that people come to Samuel French for a reason. We're very confident that we have our highly trafficked website and people will license the show and we can police it, we can market it, we can do all those things. We will invest, that's what we're investing in. So absolutely, more the merrier.
Is this included in the first negotiation with Ferris situation?
Absolutely.
Would you say that when
That's
you're
exactly
offering
what.
it?
I would add a qualification to that, which is if the play service, for example, were to make an offer for your play, it would include an advance. And that's why, one of the reasons why we would want exclusivity is to be able to earn back the advance that we put for this property.
And there is exclusivity in the licensing rights. Okay, so performance licensing is exclusive versus putting it on different platforms for publication. Okay, so these are two very distinct things. Performance license, again, if you're advertising, if you have it on a platform, again, we may not, to Michael's point, we may not recommend that you put it on the self-publishing platform as well. First of all, we got to coordinate to make sure we got the same versions all the time. We got to do a lot of that. Also, we can track who's bought the play, and we can police. Can you? Will you? Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, there's coordination. But again, we're not limiting in that. It's just we got to be smart about it too.
I'm very fresh. I have no idea. Even I was a lawyer. I don't know anything about copyright law. I just first I wrote a screenplay. I said, no, that's not the way to go. I'm going to write a play. So I converted it into a play. No, this is not the way to go. I want to do it in a one-man show, so I wrote a one-man. The same thing. But somebody wants to publish it. And I said, well, somebody said if you sign the contract with them, then you have to get permission for your movie screen to be, somebody wants to do it, then you have to get permission from the publisher for the movie screen, for making the film as well. So I just abstained away from everything.
Well, that might be something I can help you with as Director of Business Affairs, because it's going to be contract dependent. The industry standard is publishers will ask for the audiovisual, 10% of the audiovisual rights a lot of times when you're getting your basic print. Is that fair to say, you guys? You want to have the 10% of
the play service doesn't contract with subsidiary rights.
Okay, and you guys asked for the audiovisual subsidiaries for the play. But it's negotiable.
It's totally, some do, some don't.
Yeah, so I think what you need to do is send me the contract, and I can look at it and tell you what I've seen recently, publisher to publisher. I can. We have. Every time anyone sends me a contract, we keep it in the confidential membership file. So if you send me a contract from somebody, and I might have 50 other of those contracts with my comments and how that contract has evolved over time. So get in touch with me.
Sure. Robin Rice-Liptick. I just signed with Indie Theater now, and they're publishing a bunch of my plays. And I just wanted, as a point of clarification, they're not publishing the plays. They're an online library. I think it's very exciting. People go there and they can read it, but they can't download it. And they will act as the intermediary if you ask them to. I love it. If somebody inquires about who wants the script, and then they'll get a hold of me, and I can print out that nice printed out copy that the actors will want.
Except what are the chances that people are going to say, I need a play of this cast size and this genre. I think I'll go to Indie Theater Now. Their first stop is going to be one of these publishers, DPS or Standing in French.
They can read the play for $1.29 on Indie Theater Now and see if they really want it.
It's getting them there in the first place.
It's very interesting model. I agree.
And they're cutting, and they're. I also have one piece on NG Theater Now.
Yeah.
I'm just asleep with everybody. What they're carving out particularly is like fringe and off Broadway stuff. So people who are looking for what was hot in the fringe that may not be practical for you to do, but that you know.
No, it's interesting.
Well, I was hoping that this would be attractive to you guys. I mean, if I send you a play, right, that was done last year off Broadway, and it's been on the library, because that's additional publicity for you, right?
But this is again so new. You know, I asked Morgan, is there a reason not to do it? And he said, no reason not to do it.
I did it on the basis of Martin Denton's reputation.
Yeah.
I trust him.
Look, a good play is a good play. A producible play is a producible play. That's what we ultimately want, right? We want plays that will be produced and done, and that's, sure.
Follow the money trail.
One question. In order to contact you, do we need to have an agent and a contract and a production schedule, or can we just contact you and saying this is a good play?
Great question. In terms of submissions and acquisitions, we highly recommend a play has had a production or has had legs. It's going to go through a development process. It's going to change. It's going to find its way. It's going to evolve.
Yes.
It's we do have certain, and you can talk to me afterwards, and I can give you some information. We do have certain contests and festivals and those kind of things that we accept on produced work. Again, we can always send it to us, but the fact of the matter is, the more development it's had, the more it's going to stand out and be something that we can actually go with.
That's what
Michael, DPS, submission guidelines?
We accept unsolicited submissions, but I agree with Ken. Your focus as playwright should be on getting a definitive production of your play. That's really the focus. And usually we'll find you. We're looking.
You go into meetings like Fringes and Fall Forward?
We go everywhere.
We do.
We have time for one more?
One more. Yeah. Or did we get
Or
them all?
do we have anything from online?
We don't actually.
Oh, good.
Great. Thank you all very much. I'd like to thank our panelists.
Thank you, Terry.
If you didn't sign in with me,